Big vax news. Today, Pfizer saying its vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 5 to 11. For this group, Pfizer tested a lower dose than teens and adults get and found it produces the same strong levels of antibodies. Vaccines potentially available for elementary age kids by Halloween. Yes, vaccines and candy. So that's the science. We're also watching the political fights. Take Mississippi. It's got the country's highest COVID death rate. The Republican governor is blasting Biden's proposed vaccine mandate as, quote, tyrannical. And now he's getting grilled about that.
So with all due respect, Governor, your way is failing. Are you going to try to change anything to change this horrible statistic from what you're doing already?
The president wants you to believe that the Delta variant is only affecting Republicans in red states.
Are you going to change anything?
That's just not true.
What are you going to do to change
this? We believe in personal responsibility. Individual Americans and individual Mississippians.
So you're not going to change anything?
A number of GOP-led states battling vaccine mandates, despite experts saying mandates will help end the pandemic. This week, the U.S. COVID death toll will likely surpass the toll of the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, which killed about 675,000 Americans. The COVID death toll number represented here and flags planted on the National Mall, one for each life lost, which gets to a larger question. What will victory look like over this pandemic? From social distancing to masking to vaccines and boosters to maybe one day a cure, do we have an end game in sight? Joining me now to give us answers, Dr. Kavita Patel with the Brookings Institute. She worked on health policy in the Obama administration, and Democratic strategist Juanita Tolliver. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dr. Patel, I got to start with this. What does victory look like over COVID? I see the new news that now children can be vaccinated. I'm sure that puts hundreds of thousands, if not millions of parents at ease. But that's not stopping the pandemic. So are we shooting for a cure down the road at some point? Or is this something we're living with for the next 3 to 5 years until it burns itself out?
Yeah, great question, Jason. So look, the most likely scenario is that we live with COVID, much like we've learned to live with other types of viruses that had perhaps had those initial kind of pandemic-like effects, the flu, for example. And then we start to have, between vaccines and understanding how to protect ourselves, if there is a flare, we end up we go from pandemic to endemic, where we largely control cases. That doesn't mean, Jason, that we're down to zero. That means that we have hopefully on the order of hundreds to thousands of cases over a period of time. And of course, there will be death. But vaccination offers us a way to both learn to live with this virus long term, but to also be able to have a more normal life. To your question earlier about, when will we get out of this? When will we get back to normal?
I was hoping our pandemic endgame could end in a snap, but I don't think that's going to end up happening. Juanita, so we have now political consequences. We've seen this all along. The pandemic has been politicized, masks, vaccines. We have this story now about a New Hampshire Republican who switched to being a Democrat because he is so frustrated with how his party has failed to adequately address COVID. He mentions sending his daughter to college, and even though there's a vaccine mandate, 6-7% of the kids there still end up getting sick. My question for you is, do you think that heading into this fall and next year, are we going to see party switching? Are we going to see, vaccine Democrats or vaccine Republicans who are basing their vote on the status of the pandemic more than what their previous ideology was?
Look, Jason, I think there is a possibility for that, but those same people have already been the Republicans taking the off-ramp from the party under Trump at the start of this pandemic and as they've lost loved ones, right? So I would say there's been probably a trickle of that, and this New Hampshire state rep is the most high-profile one. But I do also question 18 months in the pandemic, what wasn't bothering you before, right? It's not like the Republican Party all of a sudden just started this type of pushback, just started calling Biden tyrannical for actually trying to save lives through mandates. So I'm like, okay, sure, change parties, but now use your whole chest to fight for good. Use your whole chest to fight for life as a doctor, as a physician. I think the other thing here is that Democrats know that they have voters on their side with this. Polling shows 2/3 of voters support these types of mandates. 2/3 of voters support these types of safety precautions with masks and social distancing. And so I think political messaging needs to emphasize that. I also recognize that when Biden rolled out his vaccine mandate and testing requirements 2 weeks ago, that he knew he had the public on his side. So Democrats should hit that drum regularly, especially when you have people like Governor Reeves of Mississippi, him and Han, all ultimately saying the message of he doesn't care about people. While he's comfortable and vaccinated, he's telling people to do the opposite, right? Like, it just shows he lacks respect for his constituents in Mississippi.
Dr. Patel, I've always been skeptical about the influence of influencers when it comes to the vaccine. We had Juvenile come in, did vax that thing up. I'm sure that was great. That was a bop. I enjoyed it. But you've got comedians like Jim Brewer saying, hey, I don't like vaccine mandates. We had the her kerfuffle last week with Nicki Minaj and sort of spreading disinformation. You have this week Chris Rock saying, hey, everybody needs to go out there and get vaccinated. I'm now sick, even though I actually had the vaccine. Are any of these messages that we're hearing from celebrities, whether in politics or pop culture, even Seth Rogen last night saying, hey, look, we're in a hermetically sealed place for the Emmys, I don't feel safe. Do you think that's just become noise at this point, or are there still people who can be convinced to either hold on to their skepticism or overcome it based on what we're hearing from pop culture figures?
Yeah, I do think there's still a path forward where you do have people, and especially women and women of color, who I experience hesitancy with around fertility issues. It would have been so much more powerful if Nicki Minaj had said something along the likes of, look, it's a really difficult decision, but I ultimately chose to get vaccinated, even though I've heard about friends who are concerned about fertility. That alone, Jason, could have gone so much further than exactly the kerfuffle that happened last week. And so I do think that there is a way forward. You know what, though? It just reminds me, celebrities are absolutely human, and they are succumbing to the same misinformation, disinformation, and lies that the American public is. So just when we want to think there's something special about them, they're regular people too. So in one way, they can actually appeal to very much the kind of demographics. And by the way, it's not just young people, it's old people. It's there is no one group that is more hesitant than the other. There are all types of audiences to reach, but they are human, and they are, unfortunately, the majority of them, Jason, are spreading misinformation rather than information. And it's getting even more complicated now that we have these, we have advisory committees on booster shots, and we have all these different kind of permutations. If you've got Moderna, we don't have this for you. The more complicated the messaging gets, the easier it is to fall prey to that, even if you are a celebrity. So it goes back to something Juanita said. Vaccines are our way. We can get out of this through vaccines, as well as just having a blanket understanding that immunization gets us back to normal. Immunization gets us back to normal.
I want to play a quick clip from Chris Rock and get your thoughts. It goes with those same ideas, and get Juanita's as well.
I'm going to put it this way. Do I take Tylenol when I get a headache? Yes. Do I know what's in Tylenol? I don't know what's in Tylenol, Gail. I just know my headache's gone. Do I know what's in a Big Mac, Gail? No. I just know it's delicious.
2 all-beef patties, special sauce, and cheese.
I don't know what's in that sauce, Gail.
Look, you only live twice. Most people don't know half the things they're eating. I had Carl's Jr. earlier today. Juanita, do you think that kind of messaging also does it ratchet down some of the concern? Because it's not just that Chris Rock is respected, but it's also kind of common sense. There's all sorts of things we consume that we still don't understand.
That's exactly right, Jason. Not only did he emphasize his own lack of understanding, but he emphasized his willingness to take it anyway because he knows it will help him. On top of that, I have seen now that FDA approval, full approval is going out. That's another thing that we're hearing states put out there. So people who said, I'm waiting on FDA approval, now you got it. Go get vaccinated, right? So take it anyway. Take it because we know it will save your life.
I think a lot of people who said I was waiting for FDA approval couldn't even tell you what FDA stands for. Dr. Patel, Juanita Tolliver, thank you so much for your time this evening. Before we go to break, a quick update on a story we brought you last week, a clarification. 3 women arrested after a fight broke out outside a New York City restaurant after they were asked to show proof of vaccination to dine indoors. New security footage viewed by the New York Times shows the women, who are African-American, did present their vaccine cards and were seated by the hostess. Several minutes later, 3 men joined them, but only one showed proof of vaccination. A short time later, the fight breaks out outside the restaurant. One of the women says the hostess used a racial slur and implied their vaccination cards were fake. Lawyers for the hostess dispute this. The women were released from jail with a court date set for October. We will give you more updates as we get them.